Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, happy Friday. Glad you're with us on the Three Martini Lunch. Thanks for all the great comments on yesterday's program. It's good to know you all love Home Alone and Die Hard. We had one listener saying that they're going to watch both as a result of the podcast. So, hey, as long as you keep listening to the Three Martini Lunch, we're good with that. Jim, we finally made it to Friday. We don't even have to pretend today.
Yeah, and I feel like we earned it this week.
Today we have good, bad, and crazy martinis. Let's start with the good, although this is getting a lot of reaction from both sides here. We know what the Trump defense team is going to look like for the impeachment trial. We heard Nancy Pelosi earlier this week name the 7 House managers, led by Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler. But now, from the New York Post and many other sources, you've got, first of all, your White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, and the outside attorney, Jay Sekulow, who are going to be taking the lead here, but also joining the team, former independent counsel Ken Starr, who's got a little impeachment experience, but from the opposite perspective from the 90s and the Clinton impeachment. Robert Ray, who followed Ken Starr as the Whitewater independent counsel. Alan Dershowitz, who has been all over cable news, no fan of Trump personally or politically, but saying that trying to remove him from office here is not constitutional. That's what his job will be on the Senate floor. And then Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, also on the team. So some folks suggesting this is getting the dream team back together in some ways here, Jim, with Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz. What do you make of this conglomeration of legal talent?
I was going to say the only one who was actually on OJ's dream team was Dershowitz.
That's true.
And I think it's safe to say that most conservatives do not have an instinctively bountiful, warm, and fuzzy feeling when it comes to Alan Dershowitz, particularly during kind of the times that the Republican Party was more tough on crime, and Alan Dershowitz was always a very famous and very effective defense attorney. That having been said, I think most conservatives would agree game respects game. And then when it comes to having a defense attorney, Alan Dershowitz is pretty darn good at this. Alan Dershowitz is pretty darn good at cross-examination. And obviously Ken Starr, name a lawyer more familiar with how impeachment goes. So, again, I don't think this is going to make a huge difference in terms of the voting of this. I think everybody knows what they thought of impeachment from the moment this process began. But to the extent you're going to have a trial, you want to have the best representation you can, and you want to poke as many holes in the argument of the prosecutors, in this case, the Schiff and Nadler and the whole impeachment team put together by Pelosi, and you want to trip up any potential witnesses they have. This is kind of foreshadowing the next martini we have coming up. You want to put together the same arguments of like, well, look, did you hear the president say that yourself, or is that secondhand? How certain are you that this happened? How certain are you that his motivation was X and not Y? You could see Alan Dershowitz and Starr and really the whole rest of them really putting together this. And to the extent that the American people are paying attention to the trial, and by the way, I kind of think people are going to tune it out, but to the extent they do, this is probably going to be among the best, legal minds you can have to handle these kinds of questionings, to tear apart the credibility of witnesses and stuff like that. Trump will not be able to complain. He did not get adequate representation. I think people will sit up on this. It's interesting because I've heard rumors of this for a while, and I kind of looked at it and I said, well, on the one hand, Dershowitz might want to do this as sort of a feather in a cap towards the end of his career. What bigger stage is there? This guy's always enjoyed the spotlight. But also, I think he generally believes in it. That that whatever this is, not something that a president should be impeached over. And so it might make this entire process, certainly it'll make it, for a process that I laid out in today's Jolt has no drama. Watching the cross-examination of the various witnesses, if they have witnesses, would actually be something interesting to watch.
That's true. And you're right. Dershowitz is the only one from the dream team. No F. Lee Bailey and no Robert Shapiro, as far as we know at this point. I'm sure you've noticed on Twitter that a lot of
what are the Kardashian offspring doing these days? I think Trump knows them.
They might be voting for Trump, at least some of them. We'll see. But what do you make of the backlash we're seeing now saying, well, Dershowitz is alleged to be tied up, that's a bad way to put it, but connected to Jeffrey Epstein. And Ken Starr had to leave because of a scandal at Baylor, and now he's on the opposite side of where he was with the Clinton impeachment, and even Monica Lewinsky has let it be known today, let's just say, in words we can't repeat in the 3-martini lunch, that she's not super impressed with that choice. So is this just going to be consumed in a way that, well, they're on Trump's side, so therefore I hate them or I love them?
Yeah, I mean, so regarding Dershowitz, the allegations around his connection to Jeffrey Epstein are, they're bad. There's no two ways about it. They're really, unnerving if true. But he hasn't been convicted of anything. And if there's anything Alan Dershowitz has always stood for, is that, innocent until proven guilty. It does feel fair. Again, if he gets indicted, if this turns into a conviction, then this is a totally different story. And those of us who've never had particularly fond or warm feelings towards him will feel kind of vindicated by this. Until then, these are merely allegations. They are not, something you can say, we can say for certain that he did. Ken Starr, the thing at Baylor, I don't know if that necessarily ties into the validity of the argument for or against Trump. It's not like he himself was responsible directly for what was going on at Baylor. I think he may make the argument of, asleep at the switch or something like that. I just think it's kind of interesting that the guy, people will probably say, hey, wait a minute, you thought Bill Clinton should be impeached over this. How can you possibly think that Trump shouldn't be impeached over this? And it'll be interesting to see how Starr lays that out. I think it does indicate, though, that, Ken Starr is not, people might accuse him of being partisan, but he's also clearly not a knee-jerk, well, impeach him, that he is he's calling it as he sees it. And his, as much as people didn't like, I felt like back in 1998, 1999, Ken Starr did about as good a job as he possibly could of laying out the facts of his case and making his argument. Again, very much like this circumstance, I'm not sure there were too many senators who were really going into this with an open mind.
Very few. And that's why I love the fact that the media, who didn't care a lick about Democrats who had no intention of being objective jurors in the Clinton impeachment, are now having the vapors over the fact that some Republicans have made up their mind. All the Democrats, with the possible exception of a couple, have made up their minds too, believe me. All right, Jim, let's go to our bad martini now, and this is related to impeachment. CNN asking a lot of different senators on Thursday as they walk through the halls of the Capitol Hill buildings as to whether they'd be open to including newly discovered evidence, mainly the documentation and the interview with Lev Parnas that we talked about yesterday, and how that ties into what the House is alleging against President Trump. And the one getting the most attention, of course, is the one involving CNN's Manu Raju, coming across Arizona Senator Martha McSally, and this exchange followed.
Senator McSally, should the Senate consider new evidence as part of the impeachment trial?
Man, you're a liberal hack. I'm not talking to you.
You're not going to comment, Senator, about this?
And so CNN has played that over and over and over again. The martyrdom complex there is quite strong, although I would argue that Manu Raju is probably not one of the more stridently biased reporters on the Hill. But nonetheless, McSally is also fundraising off of this, and she went on Laura Ingraham last night to talk about it.
Do you regret what you said?
No, Laura, I do not. And I said it again, actually, as I went in. I said, you're a liberal hack, buddy. As you know, I mean, these CNN reporters, but many of them around the Capitol, they are so biased. They are so in cahoots with the Democrats. They so can't stand the president. And they run around trying to chase, Republicans and ask trapping questions. I'm a fighter pilot. I called it like it is.
All right, Jim, a lot of hand-wringing on all sides here. What do you make of it?
There's really nobody for me to root for here. And I know this is going to irk certain, listeners who want to say, yeah, McSally's right. That Manu Raju's a jerk. No, I don't think he's a jerk. I got some bones to pick here and there with this coverage, but I think generally he tries to just call it as he sees it and, report what's happening and quote people accurately. There are, one or two cases in the past where he's reported something and things did not necessarily pan out the way he does. I think he may have occasionally been used sort of as a transmission belt for certain Democratic sources. There's bones to pick. There's beefs there. But the question, do you want witnesses? Or how important is it do you have witnesses? These aren't gotchas. These aren't, coming with a giant axe to grind or something like that. And Manu Raju talks to reporters all the time. And somebody pointed out that, ironically, McSally is in John McCain's seat, right? And John McCain, if you asked him a stupid question, you know what John McCain would say?
Stupid question.
That's a stupid question. That's a clown question, bro. That's and so, there are better ways to deal. So I don't really like her reaction, and I don't like the fundraising off of it. But I also don't like the way CNN has now decided this is the greatest threat to the First Amendment that anybody's ever seen, and the worst assault on a reporter since was it Gianforte who body slammed the reporter. This is just like when the Saudis executed Khashoggi. Calm down, people. Right? This was a rude, snide moment of her. Look, here's the thing: you never know. This applies to all people in all circumstances. You don't know what's going through their head and what happened immediately before an exchange like that, right? I know what kind of day McSally's having. I don't know if this is the millionth time she's been asked it. Should she have said it? No. Would it be nice if she said, I lost my cool that moment. I shouldn't have said that. I'd like to see that. I don't think this needs to be blown up any bigger. I don't like to see her fundraising, but I also don't like the idea of CNN has decided. Like if you watch CNN and or if you're on certain, Twitter, this is the biggest thing that happened yesterday, right? McSally said something really snotty to Manu Raju. I think Manu Raju could take it. You're a reporter on Capitol Hill. You're going to get a lot of people. Okay, so David Enrich was my colleague at States News Service. This is back in the early Bush administration, George W. Bush. And one of his beats was the Youngstown Vindicator. The new congressman who represented Youngstown was Jim Trafficant. You probably remember him as that guy who was, beam me up, Mr. Speaker. And he looked like he had a dead squirrel on top of his head. Anyway, Trafficant was a heck of a lot of fun to cover because you never knew what he was going to say. He was a little bit crazy. He was a Democrat, but he was kind of populist and didn't mind working with the Republicans and didn't get along with the rest of the party very much. But I'm fairly certain at one point, and David Enrich may listen to this and correct me, I'm fairly certain at one point Trafficant reached out and slapped him. Not in a hard way, not in a, but a playful, like, what are you doing? What kind of question is that? And, he's like, he actually struck me. So these things happen between lawmakers and reporters. I don't think David, filed a complaint about it. It was just, this is how things get on Capitol Hill sometimes. So, tisk, 50 lashes with a wet noodle. Don't do this, McSally. Certainly don't go fundraising for it. But CNN, come on, keep some perspective. We got bigger fish to fry.
What we know from Martha McSally is she was not a Trump fan in 2016, and a lot of folks think that may have hurt her in her Senate campaign against Kyrsten Sinema, that the base was not enthused, and Sinema ultimately ended up winning and wearing a cape sworn in for the impeachment trial yesterday. But and so therefore she's got a tough re-election fight, although it's not really a re-election since she wasn't elected in the first place, against Kelly in Arizona, the astronaut, the husband of Gabby Giffords, who's already beating her in the fundraising game and is probably the favorite to actually win that race. And so this, after it happened, is a way to say, well, let's gin up a little bit of support from the base from this.
I guess so. And again, I think that's kind of a cynical, opportunistic way of dealing with what is what's something that doesn't need to be blown up into the, media versus lawmakers, World War III. Maybe she feels like she's got to do this. I think it's a bad sign if a Republican senator feels the need to do this. And you're right, her polling really has been not all that pleasing. You're kind of left scratching your head saying, Arizona, well, God, this is Barry Goldwater's state. This is always a traditionally very Republican state and kind of appears to be drifting purple. Maybe she thinks by being Trumpy enough, she'll, if Trump carries the state, then he'll carry her over the finish line. I think Trump is more likely to win the state, but I don't know if it's quite the guaranteed slam dunk. His margin wasn't that high last time around. But again, I just feel like everybody involved in this should be better than this.
That's certainly true. Would you wear a cape to an impeachment trial?
Well, I'm a little disappointed. Apparently, Roberts isn't going to do the racing stripes that Rehnquist did. How often do you get to do the impeachment? Well, actually, these days, about every 15 years. But the sort of thing, like if you're doing it, I'm going in there with a staff and high boots, and I'm make sure your picture is going to be in that history book.
Oh, man. Senators have to stay silent, although some are saying they're going to live tweet it. So that's a little different.
They can't. They're not allowed to bring in phones.
Oh, they're not? Well.
No, there's nothing. Because like everybody's at one point I said, this is this huge advantage for Biden and assuming Biden doesn't get called as a witness and Buttigieg. I'm sorry, Buttigieg. since apparently I pronounce it too hardly for some people, Michael Graham. But the observation there is somebody's like, well, there's of course they're going to be still in the news. They're on camera. One, I don't know how much I assume it's all C-SPAN, so I don't know how much they'll be cutting to reaction shots from the senators who are watching this. But again, they can't say anything. They're being told not to talk to whoever's sitting to the left or to the right of them. You just sit there and be silent and listen. And I cannot imagine that's a terribly effective way. And of course, they'll race back every night trying to do stuff in Iowa. But this is not going to be the best of 11 days or however long it's going to last for Sanders and Warren and I guess Klobuchar and Bennett too. Michael Bennett is still running America.
I can just imagine Sanders and Klobuchar and Warren and Bennett essentially going to the Republicans and going, you got a good point. That Joe Biden needs to be here, and he needs to be testifying for days on end. And I guess that would leave Iowa to Buttigieg. But anyway, as you go through watching the media and all the political hand-wringing and the political correctness going on with impeachment and everything else, obviously stick with the 3 Martini Lunch. We're your one-stop shop for that. But another good podcast that is just being launched from Radio America that can give you some perspective, from a female perspective, actually, is the Mock and Daisy Common Sense Cast. Mock and Daisy are also known as Chicks on the Right, and every week on their podcast, it's a weekly podcast, they talk about everything from parenting to social media, political correctness, and the importance of marriage and family values. 2 women who are intelligent, they're funny, they're conservative. It definitely has a dash of politics. A lot of their different conversations arise from what's in the headlines politically and otherwise, but they take it in a lot of fun, different directions. So they believe if you really want to make America great again, you need to start in your own home. So find out more about the Mock and Daisy Common Sense Cast by going to chicksontheright.com or start listening on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting platform. All right, Jim, let's keep talking about the 2020 presidential race now. And correct me if you've heard this logic before. You're running for president. There's a front runner right now, but it's a long way until the first votes. And you think, if I just wait long enough, that front runner's going to collapse and fade away. That's pretty much how Republicans looked at Donald Trump in 2016. A lot of them kept their powder dry, thinking he'll eventually implode, and I'll be there to collect all the people who think they support him right now. Well, he didn't implode, and folks like Ted Cruz and others were forced to scramble and then go negative. Towards the end, it didn't work. Trump was the nominee. Back in 2012, a lot of people thought eventually Romney would fall. Wasn't conservative enough. A lot of people had their shot. Didn't happen. Santorum came the closest, but Romney was ultimately the nominee. Now it turns out a lot of Democrats are feeling that way about Joe Biden, according to a news story in Politico that says it took more than a year, but the Democratic presidential primary is finally coming to terms with the fact that Joe Biden isn't going to collapse before the first votes are cast. If anything, the landscape is tilting more in his favor. Biden's fundraising has improved, his polling is steadier, and his opponents barely touched him in the presidential debate on Tuesday, which we talked about on Wednesday. It was the final debate ahead of the Iowa caucuses. You got Sanders and Warren feuding now. A bunch of them, as we just said, have to stay in Washington for the impeachment trial. And all of a sudden, Biden's sitting real pretty. Even if he gets edged out in some of these early states, he's still going to pick up delegates. And once you get to South Carolina and Super Tuesday, he looks to be in excellent position. So, Jim, how did he pull this off? And what do you make of the Democrats being shocked that their front runner is actually going to be the front runner?
Yeah, I go back and forth about whether I should be, walking around strutting and saying, I knew Biden was going to do mine, because I've been fairly bullish on Biden's chances for a while now. But, like anybody else, the first time I saw Biden come out and in those first announcement videos and that first debate appearance, man, he didn't look good, right? He looked kind of, we're used to picturing him back when he was vice president, and it just kind of feels like in those couple of years, man, age caught up with him. Everything from his delivery, a lot of people said, particularly on the right, there was kind of this mentality of, Biden's starting to lose it. Age is starting to set in, dementia, Alzheimer's, stuff like that. And if you watch him in the debates, I don't quite think that's it. Maybe the memory is not quite as sharp as it used to be. What Biden has in most of these bad debate moments, and where his answers turn into word salad, so to speak, is that he'll start giving an answer, and then while he's giving the answer, you can almost see some other point pop into his head, and he jumps over to that one, and he doesn't finish the first thought, and he jumps over to the second one, gets into that, tries to get back to the first point he was getting to, but actually he goes kind of a different avenue to a third point, and his answers just turn into this jumble of phrases and loosely connected ideas and points and arguments he wants to make. And by the end of it, you're just like, what? So like everybody else, I saw the reasons to think, wow, Biden is not what he used to be. This is not going to be a smooth ride. And yet, I think what I picked up on fairly quickly, and what I think a whole bunch of folks did not, was that he had those lousy debate performances, and generally his support stuck with him. And my sense was that once people were on the Biden bandwagon, they weren't looking for an excuse to get off. They were only going to get off if they really needed to. And it's still theoretically possible. It's sometime between now and when the nomination is determined, or sometime between now and November. If Biden is the nominee, he could have a really bad moment. We haven't, as far as I know, we haven't seen the full, physical results from his doctors or anything like that. You'd like to think that enough people around Biden, if he really was in trouble, if he really was starting to have quote unquote senior moments and lose track of things and not, that people would say, okay, this man is not ready to be the next president of the United States, and gently pull him aside, pull Jill aside, and say, look, you can't go ahead with this. We haven't seen that, which says to me that everybody around him believes he can handle the job, believes he's ready for the job. In light of that, the voters haven't been looking for an excuse to jump onto somebody else. So that's why, I had this offhand comment in the Morning Jolt today, Greg. Deval Patrick, when he jumped in, said he had a plan. Said that he wasn't too late, and he knew exactly how tough it was going to be. But don't worry, he's got a plan to get himself. Greg, have we seen the plan?
I haven't even seen a second statement from Deval Patrick.
Right? I mean, there's just kind of this sense of like, whatever plan you had, it didn't work. And I don't know, did you have plan B? Did you really understand how much tougher it was going to be? So I guess the only thing that makes sense is that he and maybe Bloomberg and maybe a bunch of these other guys had this mentality of, okay, at some point Biden's going to stumble. And that's going to put 30% of Democratic voters up for grabs. And I'm going to be the one who decides to. And I think you could say a bunch of people kind of like that's where they pushed all their chips into it. And Joe Biden didn't fumble it away. He didn't do great. And the other thing I kind of think about is the come out of this is look, one of the advantage, it's like, oh my goodness, Bernie Sanders is so old and he's one of the leaders. Biden is so old, he's one of the leaders. Warren is 70 years old. Bloomberg is well into his 70s. Why are all these people so old? Well, if you've been around a long time, people develop an opinion of you. And I think at some point it's like writing in cement. Eventually it hardens. And until you do something really dramatic to change people's opinion of you, if they like you, they're going to keep on liking you. I think people decided what they think of Joe Biden during Obama's presidency, and particularly amongst Democrats. So they like him, and it's going to take something really dramatic for them to not like him. It's kind of strange that so many Democrats who are in that party could not think it. But Greg, maybe it's like that. The old joke: one fish goes by another fish and says, "Boy, water's pretty chilly today." The other fish says, "What's water?" Because you don't realize you're in it.
Exactly right. No, it's fascinating to watch, and it's also fascinating. And we talked about the fact that nobody called Biden out on the use of force in Libya, for example, without the congressional authorization. But the two people that took the biggest swings at Joe Biden in these debates, Kamala Harris and Julian Castro, ended up looking like Glass Joe on Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, because ultimately that really backfired on them. And it just didn't create any traction. And so I think following that, the folks who are closer to the top and have more to lose if they take a big swing at him are a little bit more reluctant to do so.
The one who took the one who you could say most clearly backfired was Julian Castro.
Oh, yeah.
And whatever chance Castro had probably died that night. Wasn't a great chance to begin with. Harris really did seem to score points on that first one, but she never really went after it. And, of course, the next one, Tulsi Gabbard vivisected her in front of a live audience. So there was nobody. It's very strange. Whatever attack you're going to put on Biden, you're going to have to do it eventually. And everybody seems to be waiting. I'm going to wait till it's just him and me, and then I'm going to unleash it. And I just want to point out, if that's the strategy, just ask Ted Cruz and John Kasich how that worked out.
You might never get to just him and you. it's going to be fun to watch, see what Biden does here, assuming he doesn't spend days on end in the U.S. Senate for this trial. Buttigieg will have a lot of time to himself. Tulsi Gabbard might go around challenging every Iowa voter to a push-up contest. I don't know. She did that in New Hampshire yesterday and actually won the push-up contest. So maybe she's the one who got challenged. But
whether she ends up as president, I think she could very much be on the President's Commission on Physical Fitness, the old Schwarzenegger gig.
Yes. I think she's definitely well qualified for that. So, Jim, on that note, have a great weekend and see you Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos, Radio America. So glad you were with us on this edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a kind review. That will help us out a great deal. Have a wonderful weekend and tune in Monday for the next Three Martini Lunch.